Welcome to today's deep dive. I am incredibly excited because we're going on a bit of a mission today.
We definitely are.
We're exploring a deeply fascinating essay from your stack of sources. It's titled, simply, The Suppression of Talent.txt.
A very unassuming title for a pretty heavy piece of writing.
Right. And the core premise of this document is something I think you, listening right now, have probably felt or observed at some point in your life.
Or maybe even experienced directly.
Exactly. Have you ever wondered why so many highly educated, brilliant people, maybe even people you know or yourself, seem to end up just stuck?
Underemployed,
frustrated, hitting this invisible ceiling.
Yeah.
Well, the research we're diving into today argues that this isn't a failure of individual talent. It's actually a system deliberately designed to ration opportunity.
It's a bold claim, absolutely. But what makes this duck dive so compelling is that we're not just looking at someone's opinion, we're looking at a remarkably sturdy framework.
Very sturdy.
To really understand the mechanics of this invisible ceiling, we're going to see how this essay weaves together three very distinct bodies of scholarship.
Right, the three pillars.
Yes. First, we'll look at structural demographic theory, specifically a concept known as elite overproduction. Second, we'll dive into the sociology of intellectual property and how it's used to create artificial scarcity.
Which is fascinating.
And finally, we'll examine the political economy of restricted production, which basically explains how credential bottlenecks function in the real physical world.
Right.
By the end of this, you'll see exactly how these three pillars interact to create the exact frustration you just mentioned.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with that first pillar, because there is a statistic in your sources that absolutely stopped me in my tracks.
The 90% one.
The 90%. The research points out that 90% of Ivy Plus graduates never become leaders.
Or innovators or public figures.
90%. Imagine doing everything exactly right. You get the perfect grades, you jump through all the hoops.
You play the game perfectly.
You get the absolute pinnacle of educational credentials, and then you just hit a wall.
Yeah.
It's like waiting in line for hours in the freezing cold at the most exclusive club in the world.
Right.
You finally get to the front with a VIP ticket in your hand, and the bouncer just looks at you and says the venue is at capacity.
It's incredibly frustrating.
It is deeply frustrating.
And building on your club analogy, the math proves that the club was built way too small on purpose.
On purpose.
Yes, it's a mathematically predictable outcome. The text grounds this in empirical data, specifically citing a 2023 study published in the journal PLOS-1.
PLOS-1, right.
This research looked at the sheer volume of advanced degrees being handed out versus the actual number of high-level elite positions being created in the economy.
The supply and demand of elites.
Exactly. They were tracking the mechanics of labor oversupply, and it leads directly to what scholars call elite overproduction.
So what does that actually look like in practice? Elite overproduction.
Well, it means society is generating highly educated, highly ambitious aspirants at a rate that vastly outpaces the available elite roles.
You just have this massive influx of talent.
Entering a pipeline that intentionally narrows at the very end. The PLOS-1 study confirmed that when you have this kind of labor oversupply at the top, the result, inevitably, is massive stagnation.
It sounds like society is basically writing checks that the economy can't cash.
That is a great way to put it.
We're telling everyone from kindergarten onward that the goal is to become an elite, to get the best degree, but we haven't built nearly enough elite chairs for them to sit in when the music finally stops.
Precisely. And this brings us to Peter Turchin's work on structural demographic cycles, which the research leans heavily on.
Right.
Structural demographic theory basically just means looking at the math of how populations and social classes grow and interact over time.
Okay.
Turchin looks at history from a macro perspective, going back centuries, looking at various empires and nations, and he shows that this isn't just a modern quirk, it's a recurring structural cycle.
Wait, so this has happened before. We've had periods where we just minted too many elites.
Over and over again. When societies create too many credentialed elites, the majority of them are left without the influence, the wealth, or the positions they were promised.
Because there's no room.
Right. They end up highly educated but underemployed, and historically that leads to severe political alienation and social instability.
They feel betrayed by the system.
What's fascinating here is that the structural demographic perspective removes the blame from the individual entirely.
That's huge.
These people are not failures by any objective measure. They aren't lacking in drive or intellect.
No.
They are simply surplus to a system that has arbitrarily and artificially limited the number of elite positions available.
That is such a crucial mindset shift for you to absorb.
Yeah.
If you have ever felt like you fell short in your career, despite having the skills and the drive, the data is saying it's not you.
It's really not.
It is a structural bottleneck.
Yeah.
But that naturally begs the question, why is the bottleneck there in the first place?
Sure.
Why can't all these brilliant surplus people just go out and innovate on their own, just build their own clubs, right?
Build a new venue entirely.
Exactly. And that brings us to the second body of scholarship we're exploring today. Intellectual property, or IP.
Yeah.
The text introduces a 2023 article by legal scholar Scarcity called Fables of Scarcity in IP.
Fables of scarcity.
It argues that our modern intellectual property regimes are propped up by exactly that. Fables.
Stories we tell ourselves.
Stories about artificial scarcity to justify restricting knowledge.
Yes, and the historical context here is absolutely vital. The essay points to Meredith Hall's review of Laura Ford's book, The Intellectual Property of Nations.
I found this part so interesting.
Because when we think of IP today, we usually think of it as a noble system designed to protect the lone genius inventor tinkering away in their garage, ensuring they get the fruit of their labor.
Right, the classic Thomas Edison or Steve Jobs mythology. We assume patents exist to reward individual brilliance.
Exactly, but historically, that is not how IP law evolved at all.
Not even close.
According to Ford's research, it evolved largely as a mechanism for concentrating productive power into the hands of states and large corporations.
Wow.
Early patents and royal monopolies were literally granted by kings to their allies to control entire trades, not to reward some guy for inventing a new tool.
It was about consolidating control over who gets to make things.
Zarsaid's work builds heavily on this by showing how these fables of scarcity are used today. We use these stories to justify restricting access to tools, knowledge, and production capacity, even when technological abundance is entirely possible.
And this leads to what I think is the biggest aha moment in the entire deep dive.
Oh, absolutely.
I want to quote this directly from your sources because it is just so incredibly powerful. Quote, "We do not have a shortage of talent. We have a shortage of permission." End quote.
It really hits hard when you hear it like that.
A shortage of permission. I just want you to let that sink in for a second.
It changes the whole framing.
The essay explains that modern IP laws, complex licensing agreements, and huge regulatory barriers basically prevent the public from using the very knowledge that they often paid to create through publicly funded research.
Yes.
It forces all innovation to flow through this tiny, narrow pipeline of legacy elite firms.
Right, and because all the innovation is legally forced through that narrow pipeline, those elite firms suddenly appear indispensable to society.
They look like the only ones who can do it.
They look like they're the only ones capable of producing advanced goods, the only ones capable of pushing the envelope. But the research makes a very clear distinction here. This is a legal artifact, not a cognitive one.
It's a mirage.
It is an absolute mirage. The structural demographic research we just talked about proves we have far more capable people than the economy currently allows to participate.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if the firms are creating a mirage of being indispensable, what about the elite universities feeding them? Are they a mirage too?
That is the logical next question.
The text dives into the sociology of education to answer this, specifically looking at scholars like Bourdieu, Kahn, and Rivera.
Yes.
And their research proves that elite institutions do not actually function as engines of excellence. They function merely as sorting mechanisms.
Exactly. They are filters, not necessarily for raw brilliance, but for social reproduction.
Right.
If you look at Lauren Rivera's work, for example, she studied hiring practices at elite law firms, investment banks, and management consultancies.
The top of the top.
The absolute peak.
Huh?
And she found that these firms weren't meticulously testing candidates for cognitive superiority.
What were they testing for then?
Culture fit.
Wow.
They were looking for the right pedigree, the right extracurriculars, like playing squash or rowing, the right conversational style.
That's wild.
Elite universities essentially act as outsourced HR departments for elite firms. They aren't taking average minds and transforming them into unparalleled geniuses.
No.
They are taking people who are already highly capable and often already socially privileged and applying a societal stamp of approval.
So bringing it back to that club analogy earlier,
Yeah.
the bouncer at the club isn't checking the VIP line to see if you're actually a good dancer.
Not at all.
They don't care about your rhythm. They are just checking to see if your name is on their specific clipboard.
Exactly.
And the fables of scarcity, the IP laws we talked about, are the clipboard.
That's a perfect way to visualize it. You have a small number of firms monopolizing production, holding the clipboard, and they absorb a very small number of these credentialed elites.
Yeah, the rest.
The remaining 90%, who, again, are equally capable of doing the work, are structurally excluded.
They are just left out in the cold.
And they're excluded not because they lack the intelligence or the drive, but because the entire system is architected to limit who gets the legal permission to produce and create.
Which perfectly sets up the third part of our deep dive today, the actual physical reality of production.
The factory floor.
Right. If we strip away the fables, if we ignore the bouncer and the clipboard for a second, how hard is it, really, to produce advanced goods?
A lot of people assume it's nearly impossible for regular people.
But the essay drives right into industrial sociology, citing the work of Harry Braverman, and it completely demystifies the whole manufacturing process.
It really does, because the immediate counter-argument people have is, well, you can't just have anyone building an MRI machine or an aerospace component. It's too complex.
Right. You need a genius for that.
But research on skill acquisition and team-based production reveals that even the most dizzyingly complex tasks can be decomposed. You can break them down into modular workflows.
Like what they call cognitive ergonomics, right?
Yes. Cognitive ergonomics is essentially the study of how to design tasks and workflows so they align perfectly with how the human brain naturally processes information.
Make it fit the human, not the other way around.
Exactly. It's like a complex Lego set. You don't need to be a master sculptor to build a massive, intricate Lego castle.
You just need the manual.
You just need the step-by-step instructions, the right pieces, and a system that makes sense to human cognition.
Right.
Contemporary manufacturing studies consistently find that you don't need to be a generational genius to participate in advanced production. What you actually need is access, training, and the right tools.
Okay, but this is where I have to push back a little bit, or at least share a moment of skepticism I had when reading this.
Sure. What stood out?
Because the essay makes this wild claim. It says decades of research on distributed manufacturing, apprenticeship models, and cognitive ergonomics show that the average 15-year-old could be trained to contribute meaningfully to advanced production.
The 15-year-old example. Yes.
A 15-year-old, wait, really? A teenager making advanced goods? That sounds almost entirely impossible.
It sounds impossible because we have internalized the fables of scarcity.
Oh, I see.
We have been told that only people with master's degrees from elite universities can handle complex production.
Like the gatekeeping.
But when you look at the empirical reality of modular workflows, yes, a 15-year-old can absolutely be trained to handle specific, decomposed aspects of advanced manufacturing.
Because it's just following a well-designed cognitive ergonomic process.
Yeah, exactly. The aerospace component isn't built by one lone genius holding a hammer. It is built through highly structured modular systems.
Wow.
When you realize that, it completely shatters the illusion that advanced manufacturing requires some sort of super brain trust. The capability is already there, sitting entirely untapped in the general population.
They just aren't using it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reiterates the central thesis of everything we've discussed today. The bottleneck is not human ability.
Not at all.
We have the people, we have the modular workflows, and we have the capacity to train them. The bottleneck is institutional permission.
The clipboard.
The legal and structural frameworks of artificial scarcity say no. They lock away the IP, they lock away the tooling, and they tell the vast majority of the population, including those surplus elites, that they simply aren't qualified to participate.
So we have all this surplus talent getting more and more frustrated, and we have a system that absolutely refuses to let them build.
A recipe for disaster.
Which brings us to the final part of the essay, which poses a massive, frankly thrilling what if to you, the listener.
The crowd-funded utopia.
Right. What would happen if the public decided enough was enough? What if we collectively funded an open, royalty-free IP and shared manufacturing infrastructure?
What if we just built a bypass around the bottleneck?
Exactly. The essay outlines 3 major transformations that would happen, and the first one is all about elite empowerment.
Right, because right now we have that elite overproduction we talked about earlier. All those frustrated surplus elites fighting for scraps, playing a rigged game of musical chairs.
But in an open system.
In an open system, that surplus isn't a liability. It becomes a massive engine for empowerment. Imagine if those highly educated, brilliant individuals suddenly had access to open IP, open tooling, open manufacturing capacity, and an open research commons.
They wouldn't have to waste 10 years of their lives
Yeah.
competing for a handful of corporate positions at a legacy firm just to get access to a lab.
Exactly. They could simply take the open tools and start inventing, building, and producing directly. The bottleneck disappears.
It's like giving everyone the keys to the
A
laboratory.
complete paradigm shift.
But what I love about this is that it doesn't just benefit the frustrated elites who want to invent things. The second transformation affects every single one of us.
The cost of living.
Yes. Because the research argues that in this open system, the cost of living would absolutely collapse.
In a good way.
In the best way. It specifically lists the sectors that would plummet in cost: housing, materials, consumer goods, energy systems, and medical devices.
Huge sectors.
And let's dig into how that happens, because it's not magic.
It's not magic at all. It is just the removal of a legal tax.
Right.
Take medical devices, for example. Consider something like an insulin pump or an EpiPen. The actual raw materials, the plastic, the simple circuitry, the mechanical parts, they might only cost a few dollars to produce.
Very cheap.
But the price tag for the consumer is hundreds or thousands of dollars. That massive price discrepancy isn't the cost of production. It is the cost of the patent.
It's the cost of the IP monopoly.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. If the patent on an insulin pump was public, and anyone with a 3D printer, some basic modular tools, and a cognitive ergonomic workflow could manufacture one safely, the price crashes to the cost of the plastic and the time.
It fundamentally reshapes the market.
The text points out that scarcity in these heavily IP-dependent sectors is legally constructed. It is not technologically necessary.
We aren't lacking the raw materials or the know-how to make cheaper medical devices or modular housing components.
We are lacking the legal permission to manufacture them without paying massive royalties to a gatekeeper.
Remove the artificial scarcity and the prices crash to the actual cost of production.
And that leads directly into the third transformation.
Which is the most exciting one.
The overall productive capacity of society would increase by an order of magnitude. 10 times, maybe more.
Think about it. We are currently relying on a few thousand people inside a handful of monopolistic firms to drive all of our innovation and production.
A tiny fraction of the population.
Imagine replacing that with millions of empowered, capable individuals who finally have permission to build.
The total output of society would expand dramatically.
Exponentially. And the essay assures us this is not some pie-in-the-sky utopian fantasy.
It's grounded in the data.
It is the logical, mathematically sound conclusion of all the structural demographic predictions and industrial sociology we've covered.
Right.
When you remove elite bottlenecks and allow people to actually use their skills, societies don't just innovate faster. They stabilize and they flourish.
Because you don't have a massive class of frustrated, highly educated people feeling like the system is rigged against them.
Exactly.
You absorb all that surplus talent by letting them actually do what they train to do. You give them a real outlet.
It is such a brilliant synthesis of these different academic fields.
You know, we've covered a lot of ground today, looking at these three different bodies of scholarship, from Turchin's historical cycles to the fables of intellectual property.
All the way down to how we design tasks on a factory floor.
But the ultimate takeaway for you, listening right now, is a profound shift in perspective.
A total reframing.
The invisible 90% we talked about, the people who did everything right but got sidelined. They aren't failing.
No, they are.
They're just caught in a system designed to ration opportunity. But a democratized open IP ecosystem could unlock the productive potential of millions of people just like them.
It really is a powerful reframing of how we view success and failure in our economy. Elite overproduction isn't a failure of individuals. It's a symptom of artificial scarcity. By protecting the fables of scarcity in intellectual property, we ensure that only a narrow elite can participate in high-value creation.
Keeping the club exclusive.
The essay convincingly argues that an open ecosystem wouldn't just be a nice, altruistic thing to have. It is the logical, structural remedy supported by academic literature across sociology, economics, and demographics.
So what does this all mean?
For you, specifically.
Right, for you in your own life and your own career. It means it is time to seriously rethink your own potential.
Don't let the system define your limits.
The next time you hit a credential bottleneck, or someone implies that you don't have the right pedigree to innovate or lead or build something complex, Remember the fables of scarcity.
Remember the bouncer and the clipboard?
Remember that the system is functioning primarily as a sorting mechanism, not as an objective judge of your actual cognitive ability. You have to start questioning those artificial barriers, because the math shows you are entirely capable.
This raises an important question, one that builds directly on the logic of the sources we explored today, and it's something to really chew on.
Okay, I'm ready.
Let's imagine that this crowd-funded open IP infrastructure were fully realized tomorrow.
Tomorrow, boom, it's done.
Let's say artificial scarcity vanishes entirely. If that happens, would our entire traditional education system instantly collapse?
Oh, wow.
Think about it. We have established that elite schools are primarily functioning as sorting mechanisms, the bouncers with the clipboards.
Right, for a scarce pipeline of corporate jobs.
But in an economy of absolute abundance where anyone can access the IP, the instructions, and the tools to build anything, that sorting function becomes completely obsolete.
Nobody needs the clipboard anymore.
The end of scarcity might actually mean the end of the university as we currently know it, forcing us to completely fundamentally reinvent how we define learning as opposed to simply credentialing.
That is a wild thought to leave on. If the bouncer at the club disappears because the club is suddenly infinite, what happens to the guy selling VIP passes?
His whole business model evaporates.
It changes everything.
It really does.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. Keep asking those big questions, keep challenging the systems and the fables of scarcity around you, and we will see you next time.